Hello, all, and welcome. Last episode, we heard from Guido Minaya, CEO and Chief Learning Officer of Minaya Learning Global Solutions, as well as Cecilia Chavez, President and CEO of Competitive Edge Consulting, on participating in best practices and allyship in regards to employee resource groups and business resource groups. In this next episode, we continue our conversation on ERG and BRGs in this series focused on the diversity and inclusion space, specifically looking at remote and hybrid challenges, impact and measurement, as well as trends in our political climate. Our moderator for this episode is once again Dr. Guido Minaya, joined again by Cecilia Chavez. Stay tuned to learn more.
Given that we've faced, the pandemic and the move to a hybrid or remote workforce, what impacts have you seen that companies have experienced with their ERGs and BRGs, and how have they attempted to keep them going and be inclusive and effective?
Well, it's really interesting that you asked this question because I was a division director for a nonprofit of 500 employees where everybody had to show up in person to work. We might have had the opportunity to have 1 or 2 days remote, but primarily it was a hybrid organization. That was after COVID. Now I'm working just part-time. I'm working 20 hours a week for an organization that is also 500. It is also nonprofit. It is in the healthcare industry, and they're 100% remote. And when I compare the two organizations, this 100% remote organization has viable, active ERG groups. The one with people having a hybrid schedule or showing up 100% struggled with even creating ERG groups. And the difference is leadership support, leadership endorsement, and leadership funding.
Interesting. So it's not necessarily the members within the ERG or BRG. It's how leadership either supports or doesn't support that effort.
Regardless of your schedule. Whether you're hybrid or completely remote.
And when you think of the metrics and indicators that companies can focus on to assess the effectiveness of diversity and inclusion by supporting ERGs and BRGs, what are some indicators or metrics that you've seen that help this?
I think one of the key things is career development as well as personal development. If you can focus on those two areas as an ERG, you're going to go really far. Career development can look like a mentoring program. It can look like, exposure to executives for ERG members. It can look like conferences that they hold with workshops that teach them about resume writing, interviewing skills, and possibly being much more role-centric. For instance, an IT workshop might be wonderful for an ERG group that's in the IT world, learning about how AI is going to intersect with DEI and what are the positives and negatives that people are concerned about. So there's all kinds of ways that you can offer professional development. The personal development piece is where I say that's where the gold is. It's how do you inspire people? How do you engage them and really get them excited? And one of the tools that I've used in order to do that piece has been bringing in really thoughtful leaders that can speak to all the employees, not just the ERGs, about that particular topic. For instance, a couple weeks ago, I interviewed the grandmother of Juneteenth to celebrate Juneteenth. And she's 97 years old. Opal Lee walked 2.5 miles a day just to demonstrate that it took 2.5 years for Texas to let the slaves know that they were free when they had been freed 2.5 years. And she was instrumental in getting this passed as a national holiday. That inspired everybody, and it came from the Racial Social Justice BET. And I had one of the BET members who happened to be African American co-interview with me. For Hispanic Heritage Month, a couple years ago, I interviewed Dolores Huerta. That inspired everybody, even though it was the Latino ERG that was instrumental in getting her to the platform. So that's the personal development that you can offer all employees coming from your ERGs. And then you've got the professional development that you offer the employees within the ERG. And that encourages others to join as an ally or as an affinity member.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see, even with the AT&T structure, how many of our members were exposed to new skills, new areas outside of what their employment role was within the company, and how that allowed them to vie for other positions and be considered for promotions, right? So that's a wonderful way to show high value and grow leadership. And I think that's the other aspect of an ERG or BRG, right? Is that not only are the professional development workshops very valuable in ways that maybe a more typical employee might not have as much access to through their role, but even the roles within the ERG, right? Whether it's president of the chapter, vice president, treasurer, secretary, chair of a marketing committee, or some other committee. How have you seen those roles impact employees as they evolve in their skill set and leadership skills?
Well, I could use myself as an example there. I never really thought that I had it in me to be a public speaker or to lead a workshop or even to take on a role like I have in my early years of my career. But because of all the exposure I had through our ERG at AT&T, HISPA, it just opened a whole new world to me. And it's very much responsible for who I became and who I am today. And, it's really, there's a quote that I love reading over and over, and it's not the darkness that we're so afraid of, it's the light. We ask ourselves, who am I to be powerful? Who am I to be intelligent? Who am I to be brilliant? Who am I to be accomplished? Who are you not to be? You're powerful beyond measure. And I kept reading that quote as I started my business because I was scared to death to do this on my own. But that quote has helped me evolve into the person I am today.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful story. And maybe as we close this on the current political climate that's impacted companies' approach to diversity, not only how has it impacted ERGs and BRGs, but also when you think through the history of diversity and inclusion and how it became more of a focus, and how different actions impacted it from a corporate perspective. What are your thoughts on the current political climate?
Well, one of my thoughts is when President Obama mentioned diversity in a speech and completely understood the concept, I was cheering. I thought, oh my gosh, we're home. It's finally hit mainstream. This thing is going to take off now. And it was a beautiful thing. But what's happened to it is it's become weaponized. It's become politicized. And what people don't understand is that this initiative called DEI includes everyone. It excludes no one. So even those that have weaponized it have been supported in this initiative. This initiative is also confused with EEO affirmative action. We're just focused on marginalized groups. And it is different than EEO affirmative action. We are not counting numbers. We are not counting how many of this or that you have, how many women, how many. We are looking for as diverse of a group that we can get, because when you have that kind of diversity at a table, it only helps your organization evolve into a much more lucrative business, because now you're pulling from every aspect that exists in your client or customer base. So there's wealth in it, and we've got to address those two things to lessen the political divide that's happened. The other thing that I would say I've noticed, and this is reminiscent of our EEO affirmative action stage, is when EEO affirmative action took place in the 60s, many women started to file a lot of sexual harassment lawsuits because now they were protected. And so organizations put many women in HR positions to help defend the organization. And that was smart. But many women were also set up to fail in those positions, had no background in HR, and were just put in there to show, look, we've got women doing these jobs. So setting people up to fail is not a healthy thing for organizations, but we did it again. With the George Floyd murder, if you look at the majority of the jobs that were created that were under DEI umbrellas, you could pretty much make a correlation to the EEO affirmative action phase. The majority of those roles were filled with African American people, many also set up to fail. I remember a recent colleague of mine reached out to me and he said, I was selected to be their DEI person, and I'm a coach at a high school. I don't know anything about DEI. I heard about you. Can you mentor me? Can you help me? So that's an example of what happened. And now that there's such a backlash on what DEI is, many of these same people are losing their jobs, losing their positions, or didn't deliver on what the organization expected from them. So we've got to address that. It's unfortunate that that has happened, but that's the reality today.
Right. No, great points. Great points. And I think, from an economic development perspective and going back to the workforce numbers, right? We have to optimize every sector of our potential workforce possible. And only as our area, our community, our county here is already facing a need for 200,000 additional workers within the next year. So these are 200,000 workers that don't exist yet in our area that we need. But are we truly optimizing the pipeline, whether it's, our high school pipeline, our college pipeline? How can we ensure that every sector of that population, which is pretty diverse from K-12, as you know, the younger populations are much more diverse than the older populations. How can we make sure that that pipeline of workers is on track to take on these roles, let alone attracting the additional workers? So it becomes more critical, mission critical for every company to, again, optimize the workforce that's available to them.
I call that we flipped the triangle. Our triangle used to be with the widest part on the bottom, and that was our young employees. In 2020, it was completely flipped, and the top of the triangle became the largest part, and that was with our senior employees who are retiring and leaving. So you've got workforce gaps across our country because we flipped that triangle. And how do we fill that? People are leaving, they're taking their experience, they're taking their knowledge and walking out the door. And then when you think about our younger generations and their values, for instance, boomers, I don't go home until the work is done. be loyal to a company. And our younger generations are, hey, I'm not going to be loyal to a company. I saw what happened to my parents. They were downsized, reorganized, laid off, redistributed. I'm going to go wherever the best opportunities are. So it's even more critical that we create inclusive workplaces because we want to retain our younger people that still aren't making up those workforce gaps and attract as many as we can because they will walk just like our retirees are leaving. So our organizations are very vulnerable unless we get this right. It's critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cecilia, thank you so much. It was such a treat to have this conversation about such an important topic with you. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And, I look forward to, finding an opportunity where we can work together. So again, thank you so much, Cecilia.
You're so welcome. It's so wonderful seeing you again. You take care.
Okay, thanks. Dario, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Guido and Cecilia, for sharing insights on remote and hybrid challenges, impact and measurement, as well as trends in our political climate. Cecilia, I am sure our listeners will appreciate your perspective and expertise. I look forward to our next episode where we delve deeper into the topic of business and employee resource groups. Until next time.